In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a handful of the most popular keychain flashlights and comparing their unique features, their outputs, beam patterns, their pros and cons, and a few other specs. So if you're in the market for a new keychain flashlight, this video will show you a few different options and help you decide which one is best for you. We're going to dive right in and start looking at these lights, and we'll start off with the RovyVon E3, which is a very high performing light that's packed with features in a very compact package. It has a polycarbonate translucent body and a removable pocket clip, and there's 3 auxiliary LEDs visible through a window on the side of the body, one of which produces a UV light, another one produces a red light, which is good for night vision, preservation, and signaling, and finally a light that produces a 360-degree diffuse light similar to a lantern that's excellent for hands-free use. The A8XU has a micro USB input protected by a rubber cover that can charge the built-in 4.2 volt 330 mAh lithium polymer battery in about 90 minutes. There's a single side switch that will glow when charging, and it controls 4 different primary modes and 6 auxiliary modes. It has TIR optics, and this version has an Nichia 219C emitter, which produces a neutral white high CRI light, but you can also pick it up with a Cree XP-G3, which produces a cooler light with a higher output. The A8X has a max output of 450 lumens, a peak intensity of 850 candela, and a max throw distance of 90 meters. The CRI is also very high on this light, and it produces a neutral color temperature, and the light has a big hot spot and a wide flood, which makes it great for navigating in the dark and illuminating large areas. The output starts to drop pretty significantly after a few minutes of use to around 100 lumens, where it can continue to run for about an hour. Next up, we have the latest offering from RovyVon, which is the E3 Angel Eyes, and this is a really unique flashlight because it has a hybrid power supply. So you can run off of the built-in LiPo, or you can run off of a AAA battery, which gives it the second largest battery capacity of the lights in the lineup. It also has dual warm white, high 95 plus CRI, luminous SST20 emitters, but it can also be purchased with 2 cool white, 1 warm and 1 cool, and finally a cool plus red combo version. The body is made from aluminum alloy, and it has a plastic side switch and a USB-C input to charge the built-in battery. There's a latch on the side which you can use to open and rotate the head to replace the AAA battery. The E3 has a max output of 400 lumens, a peak intensity of 900 candela, and a max throw distance of 25 meters. It has a large hotspot and a wide beam angle and a really pleasant warm white color temperature with a super high CRI, which is the best of the lights in the lineup. The light stays relatively cool and is doing an excellent job of illuminating the surrounding areas and providing plenty of visibility, and it can maintain this output for a few minutes before ramping down. If you're looking for a super high output light in a really compact package, the Lumintop FROG is an excellent light to consider. The FROG has an aluminum alloy body with an HA3 finish, with a tiny bit of crisscross knurling, and it has a backlit rubber side switch which gives you access to smooth ramping and a variety of stepped output modes as well. It comes with a 80 mAh 10180 battery and a USB-C charger, and it's also capable of running on 10440s with an extension tube, which does give it a slight boost in output and runtime. The FROG has TIR optics, a glass lens with anti-reflective coating, and a luminous SST20 emitter. The FROG has a max output of 570 lumens, an intensity of 4580 candela, and a max throw distance of 135 meters. It has a warm color temperature and a high CRI, and it's got a large hotspot and a large spill, so it's good for both mid-range and up-close use. The FROG does step down after about 30 seconds, but it's still relatively bright and useful for navigating in the dark. However, the downside is that the run times are pretty short on this light, so you can't really rely on it to be usable at high outputs for too long. Next up, we have the GT Nano, which is an incredibly long distance pocket thrower from Lumintop, and this is the brass version, but you can also pick it up in a bunch of other finishes. There's a backlit rubber side switch which gives you access to a ramping mode or a handful of step modes. It has a relatively wide head, a glass lens with anti-reflective coating, a smooth aluminum reflector, and an OSRAM KW CSLN-M1 emitter. The GT Nano comes with an 80 mAh 10180 battery and a USB charger, but it's also capable of running on 10440 cells with an extension tube. The GT Nano has a max output of 450 lumens, a peak intensity of 23,400 candela, and a max throw distance of 300 meters. It has a really tight hotspot and it excels at distance use, but there's a nice bit of spill to help illuminate the surrounding area. It's not the greatest light for walking around because it really only illuminates directly what it's pointed towards, and after about 30 seconds it will step down. Here's another look at the GT Nano so you can get a better idea of just how good it is at throwing. This light will also start to heat up after a few turbo uses, and you only get a few minutes of runtime before draining the battery on this mode, very similar to the Frog. Now we're going to check out a few lights from Nitecore, and the first one is a super compact, high output and high tech light called the Tini 2. It has an aluminum alloy body with an HA3 finish. There's two side switches on the body, one to turn the light on and off, and another that allows you to cycle through 5 different output modes and a lockout. And there's an OLED display, which lets you know which output modes you're on, the remaining runtime, the battery level, and the voltage. The Tini 2 has TIR optics and a pair of dual OSRAM P8 emitters and a USB-C charging port protected by Row Recover to charge the built-in 280 mAh battery. The Tini 2 has a max output of 500 lumens, a peak intensity of 2000 candela, and a max throw distance of 89 meters. There's not really a distinct hotspot, and it has a relatively wide beam angle with a cool color temperature, which is very similar to the other Nitecore lights. The ramp down is smooth, and it can be used on this mode for 3 to 5 minutes before the output is significantly reduced. It produces a very impressive amount of light for its size, and is very good for navigating short distances in the dark. This is the Nitecore T4K, and whether or not this is a keychain flashlight is definitely a topic that's up for debate, since it's quite a bit larger than the rest of the lights here. But if high output and cutting edge technology is your main priority, then this is definitely one that you don't want to miss, because it's the world's smallest 4000 lumen flashlight. The T4K has an HA3 finish and a similar OLED display to the Tini 2 and 2 side switches, one to turn the light on and off, and another to switch through the 5 different outputs, and a lockout mode as well. The T4K has a total reflective optic lens system and 4 Cree XPL2 V6 emitters arranged in a square. It has a removable pocket clip, and there's a USB-C input on the tail, which charges the built-in 1000 mAh lithium-ion battery, and also a mechanical quick release, which makes it really easy to disconnect the light from your keychain. The T4K has a max output of 4000 lumens, a peak intensity of 10,900 candela, and a max throw distance of about 209 meters. It's by far the highest output light in the lineup and basically produces a blinding wall of light, and it has a wide hotspot and a very wide beam angle. The color temperature is on the cooler side, and the light does start to heat up pretty quickly and is only sustainable for about 15 seconds before dropping down to the 200 lumens mode. However, you can keep pressing the turbo button to get a few more uses out of it. Next, we have another compact offering from Nitecore, which is the TIP SE. The TIP SE has an HA3 anodized finish, and there's 2 side switches, one to turn the light on and off that doubles as a battery status indicator, and another to switch through the 4 different output modes. It has a USB-C input on the side and can fully charge the built-in 500 mAh lithium-ion battery in about 1.5 hours. It also has TIR optics and dual OSRAM P8 LEDs. The TIP SE has a max output of 700 lumens, a peak intensity of 2100 candela, and a max throw distance of about 90 meters. It has a relatively wide beam angle, and there's a very minimal hotspot, and it's definitely more of a floodlight, and the color temperature is on the cooler side. It does provide more than enough light to navigate through the dark, and after about 30 seconds it will step down, but you can bump it back up to turbo after a few seconds after it cools off, but you can definitely start to notice the light heating up pretty quickly. This is the Fenix E03R, and it's very compact, and if you want to be able to jump back and forth between white and red light, this is the best option to consider. The E03R has an aluminum body and a single recessed metal side switch, which controls 4 white output modes, a red mode, and a lockout function. It also has TIR optics and a white match CA18 emitter and a red Everlit 2835. There's also a rubber charging port which houses the USB-C charging input, which charges the built-in LiPo battery. The E03R has a max output of 260 lumens and a max throw distance of 42 meters, so it's not the best at long distance use, and it's one of the lower turbo outputs, but it is good for short distance use. It has a very wide beam angle and a slightly pronounced hotspot, which makes it very suitable for walking, and the color temperature is also on the cooler side. The light doesn't get too hot in the hands, and it offers decent runtimes for its size at its highest output, and will ramp down over the course of 45 minutes. Next, we have the Olight i1R2 Pro, and if you're looking for a very compact and affordable keychain light, this is a good option to consider. This light has very fine linear knurling all over the body, and it's very durable with an aluminum alloy body. It has a twist style switch, which gives you access to 2 different brightness modes, and if you twist counterclockwise, you'll find a USB-C charging input, which can charge the built-in 130 mAh lithium-ion battery in about 100 minutes. It has TIR optics and a CSP LED, which generates a soft, well-balanced beam. The i1R2 Pro has a max output of 180 lumens, a peak intensity of 580 candela, and a max throw distance of 48 meters. This is the lowest turbo output light in the lineup, but it does provide just enough light to walk around on a trail in the dark, and it has an evenly diffused beam with a medium beam angle, and the output is going to be relatively consistent while slowly ramping down for about 20 minutes of runtime. Here's a quick look at how the turbo modes compare side by side. The Nitecore TK4 is definitely the most impressive and has a very wide beam angle that provides the most visibility. The other two Nitecore lights are pretty comparable, and the two Lumintop lights provide a very interesting contrast. The RovyVon E3 has a great tint to it, and the A8X is also quite nice with the Nichia, and the Olight i1R2 Pro and the Fenix E03R are definitely being pushed to their limits and struggling to illuminate the tree, which is about 20 meters away. For the medium mode comparison, I went ahead and picked a mode with a decent balance of output and runtime. We're going to go through these pretty quickly, and these are the modes that I think people would find themselves using most often. The RovyVon E3 has a mid mode with a 260 lumen output, and it can maintain this for about 1.5 minutes before dropping down to around 70 lumens, which can be sustained for 160 minutes longer. The RovyVon E3 has a 70 lumen mode with a 1.8 hour runtime on its LiPo battery, and a 15 lumen output if you're running a AAA battery. The Lumintop FROG has a smooth ramping mode and step mode sets, which give the user full control over the output. The runtimes and outputs are not stated, but there's more information on these outputs in the manual. The Lumintop GT Nano has the same ramping and step modes as the FROG, and again there's no runtime stated, but you can find a mode that fits your needs. The Nitecore T4K has a 65 lumen mode with a 7-hour runtime, and overall it's able to sustain the highest output for the longest periods of time due to the fact that it has the largest battery. The Nitecore Tini 2 also has a 65 lumen mode and a 2.5 hour runtime, but the output will ramp down slightly over time. The Nitecore TIP SE has a well-balanced 30 lumen mode with a runtime of about 8 hours, which will be relatively consistent. It's not as bright as the other Nitecore mid modes, but it does give you a much longer runtime. The Fenix E03R has a relatively high 80 lumen mode with a 1 hour and 15 minute runtime, but the output will also be dropping down over time. Here's a look at how the mid modes compare side by side. The wall behind the table is at about 5 meters away for reference. Of the mid modes, the RovyVon A8XU is the brightest, followed closely behind by the E3 and the Fenix E03R. All of the Nitecore lights are looking pretty similar, but the T4K is definitely going to be able to sustain this output for quite a bit longer. The FROG and the GT Nano are definitely suitable for mid-range use, and the Olight is visible with the naked eye, but is very faint and tough to make out on camera. Now we're going to be looking at these lights on their moonlight modes, so you can get an idea of what their lowest output looks like along with their maximum runtimes. The RovyVon A8X has a moonlight mode with a 2 lumen output and a max runtime of 70 hours, which is very impressive in the keychain flashlight world. The RovyVon E3 has a 0.5 lumen moonlight mode that can run for 54 hours on the built-in LiPo battery. If you're also running a AAA, it's going to be extended significantly and is going to deliver the longest runtime of all the keychain lights here. The moonlight mode on the Lumintop FROG is not stated, but it does appear to be very low and is likely around 1 to 2 lumens, and can run in this mode for about 9 hours. The Lumintop GT Nano's moonlight specs are also not stated by Lumintop, but it does appear to be similar to the FROG, and the runtimes should be similar to the FROG. The Nitecore T4K has a 1 lumen mode with a 67-hour runtime, which is just shy of 3 days, and it has a throw distance of 3 meters. The Nitecore Tini 2 also has a 1 lumen mode with a 60-hour runtime, which is slightly less intense than the T4K, but still very good considering the size of the light. The Nitecore TIP SE has a 1 lumen mode with a 50-hour runtime, which is pretty decent. The Fenix E03R has a 5 lumen eco mode with an 18-hour runtime, and the red mode has a 4 lumen output and a max runtime of 5.5 hours. The Olight i1R2 Pro also has a 5 lumen mode and a max runtime of 12 hours. Here's a look at the moonlight mode side by side. The RovyVon E3 is the clear winner here with an incredibly low moonlight mode, and you will definitely see the longest runtimes with this light. All of the Nitecore lights are looking pretty similar, along with the FROG and the RovyVon A8XU, and the Fenix E03R and the Olight i1R2 Pro are the brightest at around 5 lumens and it would be great to see these reduced to further extend the runtime. Now the lights are all lined up, ordered by length in inches with their weights in grams underneath. The T4K is by far the longest and the heaviest of the bunch, and the Lumintop FROG is the shortest and also the most lightweight. The lengths and weights of most of these lights are pretty comparable, but the RovyVon E3 and the Lumintop GT Nano are also on the heavier end. The RovyVon A8XU is also very lightweight, considering it's one of the longest lights in the lineup. Now I'm going to share what I believe to be the biggest pros and cons for each of these lights to hopefully help you decide which one is best for you. The RovyVon A8X offers great performance for a light this size with a ton of awesome features. The high CRI Nichia 219C LED is really nice, but if output is your primary consideration, you should grab the Cree. The auxiliary lights are actually one of my most used features, and it's awesome to have hands-free use. However, the lack of USB-C charging is disappointing, but I do expect them to upgrade this in the not too distant future, and there are some cons to built-in batteries, which many of these lights in the lineup also share. The RovyVon E3 is an extremely innovative light, giving you the best of both worlds, with the ability to switch between the built-in battery and the replaceable AAA battery, which deliver great outputs and long run times. There's plenty of unique emitter options, and the one that I got has a wonderful warm tint to it, but the warm-cool combo version is also a really great design. The only thing that I'm a bit worried about is the rubber gasket on top, but it did receive an IPX7 rating, and so far it has held up just fine for my purposes. The Lumintop FROG is an incredibly strong light for its size, and the output is mind-blowing, and as far as I know, it's the brightest 10180 light available on the market. If you want something that will disappear in your pocket, that can throw a blinding beam of light in a pinch, this is your best option. The downside is incredibly short run times, but having the option to upgrade to a 10440 battery will definitely help out in this department. The Lumintop GT Nano is another light with a huge wow factor due to the compact size and incredible throw distance. It's really fun to point out things hundreds of meters away with a light that's the size of your thumb. Again, we're dealing with super short run times with the 10180 cell, which is fine if you just want a fun light to show off once in a while, but if you really plan on getting a lot of use out of this light, you should get yourself the 10440 extender tube. The Nitecore T4K is the smallest 4000 lumen flashlight on the market, and it's hands down the most impressive light from the lineup in this department. The output is truly incredible, and it's amazing that something this small is able to produce this much light. The downside is the T4K is extremely bulky for a keychain light and is the least pocket carry friendly of the bunch. The only keychain friendly aspect is the mechanical quick release keychain attachment, and it should really be compared with lights in the 18350 or the 16340 class. The Nitecore Tini 2 is a very well-rounded light with a high output and a nice variety of modes, and the OLED display is very useful to have. If you like up-to-date, easy to digest data about your light, this will tell you everything you need to know, and it's nice that all of these Nitecore lights have USB-C charging. The downside to this Nitecore light, compared to the others, is definitely the small battery capacity. If you want something a bit more affordable and more powerful than the Tini 2, the Nitecore TIP SE is a good compromise. It is a bit brighter and a bit larger, but lacks the OLED display shared with the other Nitecore lights. The biggest downside to me is a lack of a lockout mode, which could lead to potential accidental activation, but you can block the buttons if you use the included pocket clip. The Fenix E03R is a great option if you're looking for something compact that also has a red light. The build quality is very strong, and the USB-C charging features are nice as well. With regards to the downsides, the UI is a bit confusing, and it takes a bit of getting used to, and the button is recessed, so it can be tricky to find in the dark sometimes. The Olight i1R2 Pro is a great option to consider if you want something very compact and affordable, and a lot of times you can find these significantly discounted during Olight's flash sales. The downside is that there's only 2 output modes, but they are good outputs, and the battery is quite small, and the run times aren't that great, but it is a decent upgrade from the i1R EOS. Let me know what you think of these lights in the comments, and if you want to pick one up and help support the channel, you can find a link in the description below. And if you want to check out some individual keychain flashlight reviews, you can find links to those down in the description as well.